Okay, here we are, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us. Sanbonani, Molweni, Abusheni, Lochani, Dumelang. Good afternoon and goeiedag to all of you. It is such a great pleasure to have you join us today. This is a day that we've long anticipated, and we are so excited to have you all join us in this session today. We look forward to sharing some information with you. We look forward to ensuring that when you walk away, you feel as enthused as we do about the agenda of this group. And we hope that you will join us in pushing this agenda forward. We're going to start without much ado. We don't have enough time, and we want to make sure that we give you time back. So without wasting too much time, I'm going to hand over to the chair of the founding group, who is Dima Al-Sheikh. Thank you, and I hope all of you enjoy being with us today. Dima, over to you.
Thank you, dear. It's a pleasure to be here with you today in a very special day, the inception of V20 South Africa. Dear distinguished delegates, leaders, and global citizens, welcome to this 6th edition of V20 happening in our beloved continent, our mother continent, Africa, where we will all be united with nature and roots and inspiration, continuous inspiration from the activation this year. This year, it is the G20 activation is happening is an unprecedented challenges. Climate change crisis is still not progressing as we hope, widening integrity and fractured trust among global scene. But we gather here for the sake of hope. We gather here for the sake of active citizenship, active interventions, thought through ideas, best practices, positivity regarding what can be done through us, by our teams, by our nations, by our communities. We always talk practical steps. We always talk small steps towards bigger consciousness and bigger understanding globally, and especially among global leaders. Bringing the values to the scene and backed with the right policies, led and presented by you, V20 community, year after year, has been received very well, has been very impactful, not only on a global level, but also at every nation that it's passed through. Last year, we celebrated a very excellent closure in Brazil, where the values are recognized, the values movement are recognized by the top leaders of community in Rio de Janeiro. And it's only the start of a continuous effort of the V20 team in Brazil, moving to the values specialist and expert in South Africa, whom we appreciate very much from our small engagement and short engagement in the past few months and weeks, where we sensed excitement, high ownership, security, stability, being rooted and being so willing to inspire the future. Those are our leaders today, the leaders of V20 2025 in Brazil, led by our beloved chair lady, Brea, and an amazing team who we are now seeking guidance from to lead our community and movement towards the future. It's not easy to operate in a global setup where many cultural differences are there and many different motives and definitions of right and wrongs among us. But what unites us here is our willingness to impact, our willingness to bring values from implicit to explicit in a very profound global language. We have been doing things in the best way in the past and not in the best way as well. And we have learned a lot together as Values 20 community to move forward with only the best practice and with only what is impactful and useful, and make the best use of our voluntarily time year after year. Many of the lessons learned have been reflected in the Values 20 Charter, what do's and don'ts, avoid, and all of them have been put together from a good spirit and from good intention, where we want to see impact year after year grow and grow and grow. What's fascinating about this year is that V20 has a 2025 activation, but also it has beyond 2025 plans where impact in South Africa will be monitored, tracked, and seen, and intentionally work on. And we admire the team for their vision on that, and for their active listening and active engagement with the previous team in Brazil, India, Italy, Indonesia, and Saudi. I'm very happy to be seeing very familiar faces year after year, and also excited and happy to see new friends and new faces year after year. My role here is to reinstill the intention of this group. The intention of this group is to bring the best practices to enhance values among community to a global level, to a leadership level, back it with policies that are effective, and with campaigns that will raise the right consciousness and the needed consciousness and awareness among communities. I'm so excited for this year's activation and looking forward for a great inception today and a great year ahead of us. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dima. Thank you so much. I'm going to quickly go through the presentation Thank you, Dima. Thank you for those words. I'm going to quickly take you through our agenda for the morning, and then I'm going to hand over to Ines. So, when the global team told us about the Inception event that needed to happen, they said to us, the global community need to understand how they are going to contribute and continue the conversation that we've started on values. And one of the key outcomes of today's session is to present the call for papers that is going to be part of our summit that will happen later on this year in October. Before we go into that section of the presentation, which will start really at about 1:30 South African time, we are going to take the opportunity to give you some insight and knowledge around the strategy that we've collated and around the team that we've collated to lead us and take us through on our values journey, on our Values South Africa journey. Before we do that, let us go back to Ines, our chair from Brazil, who will formally hand the baton over to us. Ines, can I welcome you?
Hello all, happy to be with this amazing community again, seeing faces, re-seeing faces again, and new faces also. So welcome, welcome, welcome to our Inception meeting 2025. With only 1 minute, I just want to tell you that it has been an honor to have V20 in Brazil. As Dima said previously, we believe that more than a communique, more than an event, what we do is seeding values-driven awareness in each country where V20 has the opportunity to be. So I wish the best success to the journey in 2025. I'm absolutely sure of how much this journey is going to be exciting, amazing, and looking forward to see what Priya, Tabia, and the South Africa team is going to present you. By our side, count with our collaboration, count with our enthusiasm, because the journey is long. But as Dima said, hope will guide us. So happy to be with all of you. I pass the baton officially and with lots of joy and excitement to you. Welcome, South Africa. Let's start the journey. Kisses with love to all.
Thank you so much, Ines. Thank you so much. We really, really appreciate it. We are enthused by all of this. We just believe that we can do it, especially with the support. I need to tell the rest of the people that are in this room that we have felt held by the founding group. Whenever we have felt that we don't know which way we're going, we've always felt that we've had this group that has kept us together and has kept us assured that we are on the right track. Just to let you know that our Sherpa is trying to connect. He's in the process of traveling, and he will be joining us shortly to do the official opening from the South African side. I haven't seen him join in yet, but I've just spoken to him, and I'm sure he will be joining us quite shortly. Priya,
yes, perfect. Over to me. So while we wait for Prof. Mahali to join us, he's in fact just on his way to a board meeting, which is why he's struggling to get in. Let me talk you through around some of our thinking behind the scenes. So I want to start off by sharing a little bit of a story, because I think, you know, the story is important in terms of understanding where we're coming from, and it really also contributes to the story of where we're going. So as Dima said, you know, in her introduction, the question about why values is not part of the G20 is a very important question. We are living in a society that is disconnected from one another and is really not going in the direction we want it to be going in. And many have said that the issue of values is undoubtedly one of the most important concerns that we are facing right now. So in line with this, and in line with the history that we are building on, the key issue for us, building on what Indonesia, what the story of Saudi Arabia started in 2020, the value of values. Italy in 2021, values in action. In 2022, Indonesia, values at the center. 2023, India, lead with values. 2024, Brazil, focusing on the value visions, understanding the collaborative advantage that values bring us as a society. And for us as a South African society, we collated this name, our steerco came to this name, Living Values. And very simply, what this means is that we want to have a connected sense of what values are and what they mean. An embodied sense, not an intellectual understanding of what values mean. How does values influence who we are being on a day-to-day basis? And so when President Ramaphosa introduced the questions of how do we drive solidarity, equality, and sustainable development as part of our G20 South Africa agenda, as a V20 community, we said these agenda items are really key. They speak to the core need and concern within South Africa. So we don't need to deviate from this agenda. This is a core agenda. So with this, I would like to, is Prof. Mahali here?
Yes, I'm here.
Yes, he's here.
Oh,
he's here.
Prof. Welcome, Prof.
I hope you can also see me.
Yes, we can see you, Prof. We can see you.
Thank you.
You can, Prof, you can, sorry, I understand you might have just walked in. The community are waiting for, I've just been explaining the values journey that was started globally and leading to South Africa focusing now on living values.
So you want me to spend just 2 minutes to explain why values are important, right?
Yes, please.
Yes, please, go
Yes,
ahead,
please,
Prof.
Prof. Yes.
Colleagues, good afternoon. And for me, the haunting words of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. ring true more so today than at any other time in the history of our country, that we are prone to judge success by the index of our salaries or the size of our cars, rather than by the quality of our service and relationships to humanity. Because where there is no hope in the future, clearly there is no power in the present. Similarly, as South Africans, I think the values of a country are not to be measured by its constitution, but by its budget, especially because developed countries are not those where the poor can afford cars, but where the rich use public transport. So for us, values are ideals, beliefs, and overall consumptions and conceptions that a group or an individual hold near and dear to their hearts, but also to what the world and aligns their behavior, their motivations, their perceptions, and personality, and therefore essential for determining what is desirable or undesirable, not to anybody else, but to them. They are our own private meanings that we attach to objects, to events, to ideas, and to relationships. And any differences in meaning are down to us. Generally, people are predisposed to adopt the values that they are raised with and tend to believe that those values are right because they are the values of their particular culture. I think values are critical in building not just a cohesive society as one that works towards the well-being of all in society, fights for all forms of exclusion and marginalization, create a sense of belonging, promotes trust, and offers its people the opportunity of upward mobility. So at the heart of social cohesion is the notion that relationships among members and groups in society are sufficiently good, and that all feel a sense of belonging and ownership, that they are perceived and they also perceive the whole society as greater than the parts. And when differences develop, that they can be dealt with peacefully, because in socially cohesive societies, there is generally an absence of latent social conflict. For example, conflict based on wealth, ethnicity, race, and gender, but also a presence of strong social bonds. For example, civil society, responsive democracy, and even impartial law enforcement. It involves building shared values and communities of interpretation, reducing disparities in wealth and income, and generally enabling people to have a sense that they are engaged in a common enterprise, facing fared and shared challenges, and that they are members of the same community. So for me, social cohesion drives long-term prosperity and competitiveness, because cohesive societies are politically stable and focus on economic growth, which then allows everybody in society to share equitably in its prosperity. Maybe as South Africans, we need to integrate values like dignity, Ubuntu, and equity in our daily lives by regularly practicing random acts of kindness, but also senseless acts of beauty. We don't need a reason to do that, precisely because the most beautiful soul is the one who survives the fire and yet comes back with water to help those still struggling within it. We have this thing called conscience as our connection to true worth and to the principles that makes peace a quality of life that is possible. my number one value is family, as only one of 4 core values, if you include honesty, integrity, and respect, as the most important value in life, because it provides a sense of belonging and security. Imagine having a loving, kind, supportive, and considerate family to turn to help to anchor us and bring stability, joy, and comfort. So these values are crucial for any interaction and for creating a connection with the outside world. We must continue to be the infinite hope of slaves who never stop believing in the beauty of their own dreams. These amazing peace-seeking people, desperate for a better future, all of us must urge business not only to fully comply with all laws, but to be a good corporate citizen, an active participant who exercises good cooperative governance in finding common ground, common purpose, and greater good, by, amongst others, rooting out and defeating state capture as we, together with our social partners, embark on both state building and social cohesion. What our country needs now more than anything else is conscientious, patriotic business and ethical leadership, because no longer really has a choice, but business needs to publicly declare those values that are important to it as business, but to all of us, and those that business hold dear, that we adhere to, and about making a vocal stand about those values. It is now not just looked upon, but expected of business. South Africa believes that business now bears equal responsibility with all our social partners to drive positive social change. Priya, let me just close by saying, you know, it's sad when we depend on students and ShopRite Checkers employees in Soweto to solve the corruption, the stealing, bribery, and cheating at SASSA. It is sad when the Meyer family is celebrating 2 years after their brutal murder of their breadwinner at midday when everybody was looking. There are 3 suspects, and the people who are leading us to that are the fourth estate members of the media, not the police themselves. Because you see, when you steal money, eventually it gets finished. South Africa is in a spot of bother because of greed. The people who call themselves our leaders have forgotten about service delivery. They are concerned about only me, myself, I. So I'm hoping that as a result of our conversation this afternoon, we'll agree that what is needed to move us forward as a people with great natural endowments is maybe no more than 5 things. This economy must look like us. That's called transformation. Number 2, we need ethical leadership, because ethical leaders don't steal from their own people. We need also good governance, because when there's good governance, there's checks and balances. There's the handrails and the guardrails. We need service delivery, not for people to buy homes in estates and drive the Bentleys. And we need law and order, safety and security, because without law and order, safety and security, who are we and what are we? Priya, I think if that's sufficient, I'm good. Thank you so very much.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Prof.
Mohali.
We really, really appreciate you. I think every time I listen to you, it confirms more and more why I'm doing the work that I'm doing. Thank you for always being there for us. Thank you for the leadership that you provide for us. And thank you for enthusing us all the time when we feel this task is too big for us. I think the next process is just for me and Priya to introduce ourselves. I know Prof has got to go. So Prof, whenever you need to jump off, you're welcome to do that.
Thank you. Thank you, Prof.
Hugely appreciated.
We appreciate you too. Okay, So at this stage, I think this is the time for me and Priya to introduce ourselves, and I'm going to go first. So my name is Tabea Tsesani, and my love for this work developed years ago. I must start off by telling you that in 1976, I was doing grade 1, which is not grade 1, standard 1, which today is called grade 3. And to a large extent, a lot of what was happening didn't make sense to me. And today, as I sit here, a township girl that grew up in a 4-roomed home with very little, enough to keep me going, but not as much as I have, and I've graciously been granted, I look and I say, my purpose is to speak for the voiceless. I've made it my purpose to change the world by making sure that our country is value-centric. Just briefly, my story without wasting too much time. So I'm a clinical psychologist by profession. And when I did my internship, the school that I was studying under placed me at one military hospital. At that time, it was in the apartheid era, but it happened to be at a time when we were going into a season of the referendum. Those who are as old as I am or older would understand that that was the time when a decision was going to be made about whether we should go for democracy and that freedom should be given to all or not. I joined the army at that time. I was then privileged enough to become part of the group of psychologists that worked on the integration of the different armed forces. So it was a point of warring parties that were now being given an opportunity to integrate. And that's how I fell in love with the work of transformation and where I recognized how important values are. During this time, I started doing work in the space of DE&I. I was very young at that stage, but I fell in love with the work and then moved on to the corporate world to do exactly that. I ended up working with the Commission for Employment Equity. And for those who don't know, the Commission for Employment Equity is a commission that is enabled by the Constitution to ensure that there's equality in the workplace in South Africa. After joining in less than a year, I was asked to act as the chairperson of the commission and then went on to serve for 2 terms as the chairperson of the Commission for Employment Equity. It was a beautiful time. And I really recognized that at that time, I had been gifted with the ability to speak for the voiceless, to speak for those people who do not have a voice. And values began to be very central to everything that I did. I recognized that I could not look at the world and say, it's my turn to eat. And therefore, I stand here today saying, how do I make this world a better place? And that is why values are so important to me. And in my studies, I have come to realize that without values, we can never get to this place that we want to get to. And that's why I'm here today. I am here because I believe with Priya, we can lead this team of very wonderful, intelligent, and absolutely enthusiastic people who can help us create a country that is driven by values and a country that is passionate about values. We work in a work that is difficult to do, but it is hard work. It is not work that only works with the mind, but with the heart. And shortly, and I know it wasn't as brief as I'd loved it to be, I'm handing over to my co-chair, Priya, to introduce herself. Priya, over to you.
Thank you, Tabea. So I'm sure you now all know why Tabea is my co-chair. You can see her passion. Every moment when this journey gets very difficult, I only need to look into her smiling face for reassurance that we've got this. And it is really very deeply assuring. So Tabea did say earlier, we are very held as a global community. Let me briefly introduce myself. So my background is in, I'm a scholar. I'm an academic in the space of diversity and inclusion and self-leadership. Those are really my key areas of interest in life. And I work as both a scholar and a consultant in this space because for me, I'm driven very much by the same issues and concerns that many of us have raised already. We are living in an unjust world, and this is not okay. It's not okay that people are not able to have and experience the dignity that they deserve. And that's just simply not okay. So that drives me every day to do this work. And I'm so privileged to be part of this global community for whom values is an equal concern. It's such a privilege to be able to be amongst a community where you feel seen and where you feel heard, and where it's okay to say, no, this is simply not okay.
Mm.
We need one another. We need to work together. This is difficult work, and the work is going to probably get tougher. So more than ever, as we talk about this values work, our own cohesion is essential. So I would like to now, we need to talk a little bit about the strategy, but we are running short on time. Tibia, can I hand to you to briefly start our conversation on this?
Sure, thank you very much, Priya. So we're going to share with you our strategy and how we see this unfolding over the year and possibly beyond. As a starting point, I'd just like to remind all of us that when the presidency was handed over to our President Ramaphosa, he identified 3 key themes that he wanted to focus on in G20 South Africa 2025. He identified solidarity, and Prof. Mohali has spoken a lot about social cohesion, and that's actually what it is. It is about the interconnectedness of the world. It is about ensuring that there's less disparity between people, and that we can ensure that we have sustainability, which is grounded on people being able to have a portion of the wealth that everybody else has, the privileges that everybody else has, and that we can all stand together and say, this is our world. We are the world together. So solidarity is that first thing. The second one is equality. And equality is really about promoting and striving for a place where there's equal opportunities for everyone. Our Constitution talks about equality. Section 9 speaks about equality. And I think in his thinking, it was really about getting to a place where the economic imbalances of our country are broken down, and where we can get to a place where, whether despite your gender, your race, your geographical background, we can all get equal access to opportunities. Finally, the third theme is sustainable development. And here, we're thinking about the future. We're thinking about how do we preserve that which has been gifted to us to make sure that future generations can also enjoy that. We believe that when this is achieved, we will have what we call social justice and equality. Next slide, please, Priya. So in line with that, we started thinking about values. We started thinking about values, and these values are not cast in stone. They're iterative. This is what we thought would be a good starting point, and it resonated with us. But it is by no means the final values. It's a conversation starter. And basically, we are looking for a world that is value-based. We're looking for leadership in all sectors that are value-based. And we've identified 5 values. First is dignity. Second is Ubuntu. The third one is ethical governance, ownership and agency, and finally, equity. And the question that we ask as we start our conversations is, how do we enable solidarity, equality, and sustainable development, which are the themes I've shared, to ensure that through values, we can help achieve these 3 themes? What is the role of values in driving this? In the next slide, you'll see that to a great extent, these values are not values that are already lived. And I think that has been very obvious from what the professor has said. And basically, there are aspirational values, and they're described in more detail here. And we do not have enough time to go into the details of all of them, but I do believe this recording will be made available. As we continue to engage, they will become commonplace for all the people that are in this room that are passionate about values. I'm going to hand over to you, to Priya, to complete the rest of the presentation. Thank you.
So I'm just going to complete the introduction, and then we are going to be handing over to our research stream to present the call for papers, I just want to do a couple of things before then. I want to briefly talk to you about our strategy, and then I would like to introduce you to the advocacy team who are going to be driving the awareness strategy. And then the latter part of the presentation, as I said, will be dedicated. Our research team are going to be talking about the call for papers. So globally, when we look at the precedent that has been set by other countries, the focus has largely been on creating a communique, which is very important and is very relevant because, you know, we need legislation, we need formal guidelines to iteratively improve as a community and as a society at large. The big problem in South Africa is we have a lot of really awesome legislation already, and it isn't necessarily, and in many cases, isn't followed. So we can't only have a communique as part of our V20 agenda, a very important part in order for us to address the vast inequality in South African society is this work on advocacy. And so to this end, we said, right, what is it that we need to do, both from a research and advocacy perspective? The key goal for 2025 is simply to create awareness around values in our society. Simply, just about creating awareness. Later on in this project, we aim to be able to create an embodied sense of values. So once again, going back to what I was saying earlier about the statement on living values, is when we integrate values into how we live and how we be. For now, we simply need to say, what is this construct of value? What does it mean? How do I enact? How do I behave differently in relation to this? And so the work of our research team is going to be, our research team are using a rigorous methodology to develop the communique. And at the end of the communique, they are saying, right, or at least as part of that process, of that research process, they're saying, what do these recommendations mean for practice? How do we start influencing practical recommendations, and how do we draw out practical recommendations from these academic suggestions that are coming out from the communique? Another and very important part of what we want to be doing with this work, and this is a long-term objective, is the development of a values charter. So as Tabia was saying, we have a really wonderful constitution. The constitution does speak to issues of dignity and equality, but we don't have an expansive document that really provides a guideline on values. Yes, we've got legislation or guidelines, you know, we're looking at King 4 and now King 5, but from a citizen perspective, what do values really mean? And this is one of the ideals that we'd like to accomplish. So we have ambitious targets that we'd like to accomplish. Yes, the research communique is a key outcome of what we'd like to accomplish. Influential conversations are really senior leaders having important conversations around values with other senior leaders. Strategic partnerships is the sense of which organizations are already leading advanced or relevant conversations in our society, and how do we partner with them to drive the values agenda in 2025? Civic engagement is this point of how do we utilize the current G20 infrastructure to further values conversation. We will naturally do this through social media as an important partner in our work right now. I don't need to expand on that. And then, as I was saying, the values charter. We have already about more than 60 volunteers working on this project, and this organogram doesn't even begin to cover the number of people that are working on this project already. We have a very strong advisory wing that are composed of both our Sherpa, who you've met, Bonang, a number of very senior leaders in industry, and a number of ambassadors that we have appointed. These are people from around the world that have said, we believe in this agenda, and how can we support you in driving the work that you need to do in South Africa? And also South African ambassadors, you know, senior people in industry that are saying, how can we partner with you to enable what you need to? We have a volunteer steering committee who are acting as our secretariat. We have a research team that are appointed and are working on our communique already. This is activated. and we have a values advocacy team who are leading the advocacy partnerships, strategic partnerships in our community. So I would like now to introduce you to some of our team, and then I'm going to move on to talking briefly about the research communique, and I'm going to hand over to Kamaran and our research team to talk about the call for papers. If our advocacy stream leads could please come on camera so everybody can have a look at you as I provide a brief introduction. So as per our advocacy stream leads in solidarity, we've got advocacy stream leads in equality, and we've got advocacy stream leads in sustainable development. And then we also have an integrator. So on solidarity, we have Dr. Dumisani Magadlela, who is a globally recognized leadership coach and thought leader specializing in Ubuntu-based coaching. His expertise positions him as a key figure in shaping inclusive and transformative leadership models. Themba Sayisi is a human rights lawyer and an ambassador for social justice, dedicated to fostering solidarity and equality. As a researcher at the Center for Social Justice, so yes, Themba works closely with Professor Thuli Madonsela. He is a recognized leader in youth activism and has championed legal and social justice reform in South Africa. Monde Ndlovu is our equality stream lead, and he is the managing director of the Black Management Forum. He is a strategic thinker and a policy advocate focused on economic transformation and inclusive leadership. Alex Matole is a business leader and a sustainability advocate. She is the founder of an organization called Justice Advisory and is a board member in multiple industries. She has led efforts to integrate sustainability into corporate and policy frameworks. Tabani Mlilo is our sustainability activist specializing in environmental governance, particularly in the mining and energy sectors, and he is working to integrate sustainability into corporate decision-making and policy frameworks. And Kim is our policy advocacy integrator, and Kim's role is to support the team and make sure that all of them are performing their role equally across all the different streams and driving a common agenda, advocacy agenda in South Africa. She is our advocacy specialist with expertise in social impact policy engagement and program development, and has led initiatives that amplify marginalized voices, influence policy, and drive meaningful change. So we are led by a very capable advocacy stream team. Thank you, team. And you will see all the South Africans amongst us will see a number of events that are going to be hosted by these stream leads over the course of the year that are going to be driving values advocacy work in South Africa. So thank you very much, advocacy team. Now I'm going to move on to our research agenda. And before I go there, I want to talk to the research communique. When we look at, so when the global team onboarded us, they said to us, ensure that the process to develop the research communique has a strong, sound academic research methodology. We want to make sure that the findings that are in the communique are reputable findings and have strong validity. And so to this end, we said, right, let's make sure that we appoint academics to lead these streams because they are already socialized into what the requirements would be from a research perspective. And together with Professor Kamaran, Peter Kamaran, if you could come on screen, Kamaran and I, together with a global team, and of course Tabia, when I say Kamaran, everything, Tabia and I are part of the same. So when I say I always mean we. The two of us are working closely on everything on this project. We came together with Tabisile, and we said, right, let's, how do we create a strong methodology in terms of what we want to do here? Kamaran, I think I'm going to invite you to talk through this very briefly, because we need you to focus on the call for papers.
Okay, so I mean, we're basically undertaking a case study methodology, you know, as typical of like Robert K. Yin, for example. And that will allow us to be able to put together some case studies where we look at the core themes through the collection of values that we've seen and try and get some lessons learned on what worked and what didn't work in achieving the outcomes that are aligned with each stream, solidarity, equality, and sustainable development. And what we hope to achieve through this is to have a set of case studies. We have some key lessons about the roles that values play in achieving outcomes, perhaps even, conversely. And then we would like to have some kind of cross-case comparison as well. So we've got a very strict protocol and structure to how we're doing this, so that we will be able to conduct a cross-case analysis at the end of it as well, and then distill some findings that will be reflected in the final communique.
Thank you, Kumaran. Any questions on? We don't have time to go into this in much more detail, but I invite you to to frame your questions to us via email if you have more questions that you'd like to raise in that regard. Okay, so now I'd like to invite the research team. Kumaran is here already. I want to briefly introduce our research team, and then I'm going to hand over to them to talk about the call for papers. So Kumaran is an associate professor at the Alan Gray Center for Values-Based Leadership at the University of Cape Town's Graduate School of Business. He is also the executive head of the Center for Analytics and Behavioral Change. He is a trained theoretical physicist and an astrophysicist, and he is a systems and complexity theorist. Dr. Njeri Magiru is our solidarity stream lead. She is a senior futurist at the Institute for Futures Research at Stellenbosch University's Business School. She specializes in helping individuals, organizations, and states in Africa to navigate complexity and uncertainty while pursuing long-term goals. Dr. Ruwen Kok is our equality stream lead. He is a registered organizational psychologist with global experience in diversity, equity, and inclusion. And in leadership development, he has worked across Europe, the Middle East, and Africa, leading culturally diverse teams. Dr. Shamim Bodania is our sustainability stream lead, and he is a scholar practitioner with over 14 years of industrial experience and 22 years in academia. He is the editor of Large-Scale Systemic Change Theories, Modeling, and Practices, and has widely published in interdisciplinary systems research. Dr. Tabisile Mhlongo is our research integrator. So much like Kim played an integrator role in the other stream, in our advocacy stream, Dr. Mhlongo is playing the integrator role from a research perspective. Her research interests focuses on leadership complexity within entrepreneurial systems in emerging contexts, advocating for systems thinking to help entrepreneurs manage, navigate change. So with this, I'm going to hand over now to Kumaran, who's going to take us through the call for papers. And Kumaran, I think if you would please contextualize for the members of the community who don't currently understand where the call for papers fit into the global agenda, into the summit agenda, please.
Okay, so, we are conducting our own set of studies with our research teams on these three core streams and the values that underpin them as a South African team. And that'll be reflected in the communique that we share with the G20 after all the case studies are done, all the research being pulled together. And we've really gone through a good process of distilling our messaging so that it's succinct and clear and to the point. This call is about inviting the global community into it's more about promoting the discourse around values and the role that values play in achieving the kinds of outcomes that we hope to achieve globally. So this call is more for engagement. It won't necessarily, if we do learn some interesting things out of the papers that come off this call, we may integrate some of those into the communique, but they're two separate activities. This is more about global engagement and sustained global engagement around the role that values play in decision-making and organizing. Is that good enough, Priya?
That's perfect. Thank you, Kumaran.
Okay.
Thank you.
So I'll launch into the the outline of the call?
Yes, please. Thank
Okay.
you.
Okay, I'm aware we're a bit behind or we're a bit over time, so I'll try and keep this brief. A lot of the speakers have already introduced enough of the substance that I don't have to go through it again. So I'm going to try and cut a line through it that's perhaps more relevant and succinct than I originally intended. I've got some notes in front of me that I'm speaking to. So I'll be proceeding from the call proceeds from the perspective that we are in an era of grand complexity. So, we're experiencing changes in multiple dimensions: social, economic, environmental, political, technological, even just physical and infrastructural. There are sea changes occurring in the world. We're living in a world that's more interconnected than ever before, whether we look at communications or whether we look at, globalization of markets, supply chains. And in this kind of world, remote and cross-scale effects really matter. So, what happens in one part of the world may impact another part of the world. Or, climate change is a good example of cross-scale effects where something happening at the global scale has effects at local scales that are very significant. So in this context, we as a global planetary civilization need to respond to these wicked problems or grand problematiques, as some scholars refer to them. And that responding to them is not easy, right? It requires some level of coordination. These problems are also vastly interconnected. So you can't solve them from one disciplinary perspective or one sectoral perspective alone. So it really is an exercise in complexity and grappling with these global change phenomena that we are currently experiencing. If you add to that we are not just in an era of complexity that we've been talking about now for the last 30 years, recently we may be tipping over into chaos, to put it quite frankly. And so traditionally, we're seeing challenges to the rules-based order now in a way that we haven't seen for very many years. And so the question that we're grappling with here is, we have global compacts such as the Sustainable Development Goals. We have global compacts around corporate citizenship, for example. And these are really important guiding frameworks. We also have a rules-based order, well, to some degree. We can debate, how effective it is. But we also have very influential global bodies such as the G20, whose decision-making really matters at a global scale. They set the agenda for the entire planet. And I think the core thing about this call, if I can try and pitch it to you, is a lot of the role of values we've been discussing so far has been around personal embodiment of values, how we move through the world as a values-based leader, for example. But what this call is focused on, and it reflects, I think, my own disciplinary orientation, because I mainly look at values-based leadership for organizing and organizations, is this call is responding to the need or the role that values play in organizing and organizations, not just at the scale of an organization, but it also plays a role in how organizations or networks of organizations can coordinate with each other. So when value scripts are successfully propagated, whether it be within an organization or through a network, it brings greater strategic coherence. And we're watching the emergence of a multipolar world right now, and we're looking at serious threats to the global rules-based order. And it struck me as everyone was speaking that what we do have, though, is we have the power of values to shape decision-making and organizing, and at multiple scales. So that's what this call is orientated on. For example, you can get local and national organizing around some of the agendas that we want to see through. But you also have translocal and transnational organizing. And value scripts or values can play an important role in holding this together in a strategic way. right? So getting strategic coherence between them. So whereas Prof. Mohale spoke about social cohesion, I'm talking about cohesion in organizing here. How do we maintain that cohesion in organizing? And values play a key role in that, especially when the rules-based order may not be working the way we want, and especially as the global compacts may come into question. So in this case, what we've done is we've said, look, we want to go with the same three streams, so solidarity, equality, and sustainable development. And we're foregrounding our values. We want to understand how the goals of each stream are achieved through mobilizing values in different contexts around the world. We don't want to be prescriptive about the values, but we do want to be prescriptive about the streams. We understand that something like Ubuntu as a value may not fit very well into another context in the world. So although we want to foreground our values of values-based leadership, dignity, ethical governance, ownership and agency, equity, and Ubuntu, we are not restricting the call to those. It stands to reason that there may be other values in other parts of the world that bring about successful outcomes, or conversely, which you're also interested in. We don't just want to understand how success is achieved. So the call is specifically targeted at contributions that illustrate the role that values play in achieving thematic outcomes. Although we foreground the 6 core values we are interested in the South African context, the call is not restricted to them. We will prioritize contributions that engage in both critical thinking, but foregrounds practical implications. So I think Pierre touched on this. We really want rigorous work. So we want to bake in some academic rigor and provide some very, very useful recommendations for practice. That's what we're focusing this call on, because we can talk about values until we're blue in the face, but how we mobilize them and get effective results through them is really what we're interested in here. So we're foregrounding praxis and the practical implications of the research that will be submitted in this call. We also want to stress that contributors stress their own positionality, as well as reflect the context and situationality of the cases they may be dealing with or the studies they may be dealing with. We think that's very important so that they can be located well. In terms of the timeline, the abstract will be about, I think, 250 to 300 words by 30th June. We will inform people of which abstracts have been accepted by 20th of July, and the full paper is expected no later than 20th September. Thank you.
Thank you, Kamaran. I'm now going to hand over to Njeri. Njeri, are you able to talk to us through your streams, please? Substreams.
Yes, I am, Priya. Thank you very much, and warm greetings to everybody from Cape Town. It really is my pleasure to lead the Solidarity Research Stream as part of the V20 2025. Building on the comments and remarks from our Sherpa to our co-chairs and from Kamaran, solidarity is a focus theme, recognizing that contemporary times are defined by what we could call a meta-crisis, this convergence of multiple complex but also shared problems. But also contemporary times are defined by amazing potentialities. And these dynamics, both of crisis and opportunity, demand fresh approaches to solution findings, but also, as Kamaran has so clearly laid out, they demand collaborative implementation of resolutions based on innovative responses and a commitment to work together towards meaningful systems transformation, because clearly, as is evident in so much of our lived experience and what the data is showing us, the current status quo is insufficient and inadequate. It's not fit for purpose in terms of the current times or what we're hoping to build. So the research stream approach to solidarity is in line with the overall V20 approach, which is systemic. It's welcoming contributions that look at the local to the national, regional, and global levels, but also contributions that reflect on the personal and the micro, the interpersonal and relational to the macro and the collective. So a systemic lens is very welcome. Also in terms of timeframes, keeping in mind solidarity as it applies now to current generations, but also solidarity in terms of an accountability to future generations. And insights are welcome, as Kamaran said, that critically engage on the solidarity theme, particularly underscoring that in an interconnected world, our problems are shared, and therefore, of necessity, responses demanded must be coordinated. So insights that critically engage on what this looks like, what this takes, what are the ingredients for coordinated responses in an interconnected world. At the same time, I also welcome insights that confront the severe challenges to solidarity, particularly reflecting on our current times of deep crisis and spreading conflicts. So we welcome insights that talk to the tough questions and engage the contentious issues, as well as the emotive debates. And this is because the V20 platform offers a very needed space to continue dialogue and discourse and discussions from different viewpoints, from competing points of interest, and from perceived irreconcilable standpoints. And it's a platform we should mobilize, that I call for us to mobilize towards finding areas of mutual benefit, of shared solidarity, where we can meet and nurture and strengthen our interconnections. So the point is not to present arguments for the sake of it or to be argumentative. When we welcome the contentious debates, it's towards trying to find and engaging in discourse towards practical, concrete and tangible recommendations, building on the values conversation so that we work together, as Tabia mentioned, recognizing that we are the world together, we're the planet together, to realize better futures for all of humanity and our planet, both today and in future generations. So some suggested areas, and these are not exhaustive at all, are around multilateralism. What are the challenges and opportunities for global cooperation? Translocal solidarity in the global south, so some geographically located discussions are welcome, but also how do we strengthen solidarity through dialogue and collaborative action, again driving towards those tangible, concrete recommendations that can be useful to helping us untangle some of the web of contestations we face. And on that point, one of the other themes authors are welcome to write on is the debate on contestations of diversity, but also the solidarity economy, the debates around taxation, wealth tax, billionaire tax, and how do we build solidarity in the face of spreading conflicts, crisis, and what are the implications for solidarity movements. I very much welcome contextualized pieces that understand the role of values within a contextual context, but also understanding interrelationship and this notion of an interconnected world. So principles of solidarity that can widely apply. I hope that's helpful, and looking forward to reading what might stream my way. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Njeri. Roy, can I move to you?
Thank you, Priya. Good afternoon, everyone. What I will be talking to is the call for papers on the theme equality. As I was listening to everyone, I was just reflecting on our current context, which is South Africa. And South Africa is one of the largest economies on the African continent, and yet one of the most unequal societies in the world. And we've learned over the years that equality is, and we know this from our research, from our practitioners as well, that it's a prerequisite for inclusive growth, ethical governance, and sustainable development. I have a friend that always says, equality is not the elephant in the room. It is the room. And what he means by that is equality is systemic in nature. We have an opportunity through the summit to have a chance to influence policy influence global policy in advancing fairness, dignity, and opportunity for all, given the global state that we find ourselves at the moment, politically or geopolitically. But however, economic, social, and political barriers are part of that systemic nature, and it limits the participation and opportunities for people. And so we invite scholars, policymakers, practitioners to contribute to promoting a values-driven, action-orientated solutions to inequality. A values-based approach to equality is vital, we believe, for fostering this inclusive policies and also ethical governance that was referred to previously by Professor Bonang. So if I can look at the focus areas, again, not exhaustive, but how we looked at it is from an economic, social, political, and an intersectional perspective. And so if one looks at the economic inequalities, looking at economic justice and sustainable policies, looking at employment, and also looking at global equity. If one looks at through economic justice and inclusive growth, as I talked to about in my introduction. From a social perspective, looking at health, education, access to health, access to education, and also social cohesion and how we reduce systemic divisions. Looking at the political equality, we are looking at submissions around inclusive governance, leadership, diversity and political representation, civic engagement, and participatory policymaking. And we have some really great case studies of how values-based engagements have been used across the continent, and we hope that we get not only from the continent but globally as well in terms of civic engagement and ethical governance and policies that's been spoken about previously. From an intersectional equality perspective, looking at gender in the workplace and leadership, looking at rural, urban, and geographic disparities, climate justice and sustainable development, and intersectional identities and equalities and justice within that context. Again, this is just a list that we provided in terms of our original thinking. Of course, if there are other perspectives and paradigms that were not reflected here, we would welcome those submissions. And I thank you for your attention. I'll hand over back to Priya.
Thank you, Roy. I'll hand to Shamim.
Thank you, Priya. So good afternoon, everyone, and it's my pleasure to talk to you about the call for papers in the sustainability stream. And our perspective as our team, as we thought through this, was to understand it in the form of the long game. So if you see the value, the sustainability theme definition, it's actually building on the Brundtland Commission. But in a sense, as we reflect on this, we think about the fact that the Brundtland Commission was almost presaged by the work of the Club of Rome and the Limits to Growth, the work of Donella Meadows and Forrester and his team. And you see that in the context of the long game, and we mustn't lose sight of that. So what that talks to is the fact that when we're talking sustainability and we're talking sustainable development, a systems perspective is absolutely essential and critical, and understanding the interrelationships of all of these complex variables. So that's kind of, in one sense, framing the boundaries of our thinking around this particular stream. The other side of it is the stuff that's facing us. We know that we've, as a planet, as a society, we've transgressed 6 of the 9 planetary boundaries. So here we're starting to talk about tipping points. We're starting to talk about critical thresholds that, without wanting to sound alarmist, if we don't deal with it, we is essentially on a precipice. And what does that mean in relation to how we turn that around, and how can a values-based lens in understanding this help us turn that around? Because at a very simple level, you know, we have in systems thinking, almost systems 101, there's something called the systems iceberg. And it talks about the places where you have the most, from an intervention point of view, where you're going to have the most impact. And it starts off with events, patterns, and structure. And as systems thinkers, we focus a lot on structure. But beneath that is mental models and values. And Delano Meadows put this in her places to intervene in a system. Ultimately, the place that has the highest leverage is in our worldview, in our values. So these all fit in very nicely with work that's been going on for 53 years. And I think the time is now in foregrounding how values need to come into play. And so that's our team's kind of been thinking around those aspects. You will also see that there's in these focus areas, and I won't read all of them, we'll scan through some of them. What you would notice is that in one sense, we're being provocative, we're being unapologetic that this is the South African G20. We're unapologetic that we're want to foreground a global South perspective. But that provocation is not in the form of exclusion, because we want to have the global conversations around these things. What does it mean? What are the implications if we bring in the global South perspectives, if we start foregrounding the needs of the large majority of the world when it comes to the theme of sustainability? So as much as we're unapologetic, we're also very inviting. This is an invitation for a constructive global conversation around some of these provocations. You would also notice that we're not shying away from the fact that there are polarities, there are creative tensions in all of these things that we're talking about. And we want to engage constructively in a rigorous way around how do we work through these polarities and creative tensions in relation to our theme of sustainable development, and indeed even in values. We deal with issues around asymmetric power and wealth relationships, and what does that mean for the interventions? What does that mean for funding flows? What does that mean for global finance around climate change? All of those come into play. We bring into stark relief the notion of decoloniality and sustainability, and bring that back into an engaged discussion around what that might mean. And we're also suggesting that as much as, and this is the language of corporations, this is the language of governments, this is a language of us as societies, that we need growth. And economic growth is the answer, because we're living in deprivation, we're living in poverty, we have these huge divides. But one might hesitate to say there's a movement around saying what are the alternate perspectives. And it may not be mainstream in the mainstream narrative, but certainly in the academic circles, there's very rigorous work around degrowth, post-growth, the well-being economy, and alternative ways of thinking without throwing the baby out with the bathwater. We've had the SDGs for a long time. What does that mean in terms of translating that into the practical side of SDGs? We've had a big part of our discussions in our team is starting to say, well, what about where we are in terms of, if we're saying we want to have practical recommendations, this means the ordinary, inverted commas, citizen, every one of us in our role outside of the academia, outside of government, outside of corporations, as human beings, as citizens, where do we come into this? Where do we feature? So one of the things that we would like to almost kind of work together is there's been work on the IDGs, the internally driven development goals, and bring that in relation to the SDGs. So essentially, we are opening up a space for bringing multiple perspectives, multiple paradigms, but within the kind of broader boundary of this particular V20, that it's got to be values-based, that it's got to be rigorous in terms of thinking, critical thinking, and practical recommendations. And that's our invitation. Thank you very much, Priya and the team.
Thank you, Shamim. So we have already, thank you, Helen, at Angela for the first hand, for the first question.
Hi, everybody. My name's Angela from Johannesburg. One of the things for me that comes up in these conversations always is, whilst there's almost like a trinity or a Borromean rings of the three elements of the perspective that's shared here, there's almost always for me a core that sits right in the middle of that, and that's the whole question of choice that speaks to all three of those elements, and how choice is also underpinned by values. And so my question really is what is there a core right in the center that would then speak to the three different streams, or is it more going into the particular streams that have been outlined? That's my question.
The core, can I answer, Priya?
Yes, please go ahead,
Make a
Mark.
step. The way I see it, the core is actually the 6 values that we've put together, because that's what we're viewing these 3 streams through. So there isn't a single core, but as a cluster of values at the core that we contend are important for achieving these outcomes, although challenges to that contention will also be most welcome.
Yeah, and then in speaking to those values, there's also the whole principle of choice and choosing to adopt those values. And for me, a lot of people worldwide don't really kind of connect with the energies of choice and then the consequence of choice. We have rights, we also have responsibilities. So it's that conversation as well. So is there an opportunity to then present papers as well when you're talking about a call for papers to speak to specifically the core itself?
I would say, and I'm sorry if I'm speaking of my other colleagues here, but it's such an important question because values underpin decision-making, which in turn informs organizing, whether it's structured organizing or whether it's emergent organizing. And I think we're going to have to make those threads because when values are distributed, the value scripts in a coherent way, then we don't need a top-down strongman style approach towards achieving the outcomes. We can see organic outcomes emerging from the nature of the organizing. So yes, contributions from my perspective along those lines would be most welcome.
Thank you, Cameron.
Any further questions? I did see a hand, but I missed the name.
Priya, from our side, I can't see any hands. I'm not sure if there's another one. There aren't any. I think that was the only question we had, Priya.
Okay. So if there are no further questions, is there anybody that maybe would like to speak to something that they were thinking about contributing before we conclude? Maybe you could trigger some thought in somebody else that might be thinking about how they're going to be framing their conversation. Angela, go ahead.
Sorry. Something that I did, and it'll speak to a lot of the work that's being done here, is during the Nelson Mandela Centenary and even prior to that, have actually created a board game called Choices, which links to responsible citizenship. And in the board game, it actually threads in each. It can be customized to any set of circumstances, any particular context, but it does become systemic and it is multidisciplinary and it can be played by any, well, not so much the younger, the littlies, but certainly from teenage years up. And so that's the kind of thing that for me, I could then certainly dialogue and have a conversation around whether that would be relevant around entrenching responsible citizenship, because ultimately that all comes back down to living as a responsible citizen on the planet for now and for future generations.
Yeah, we'd like our corporate citizens to also be responsible citizens.
Well, it speaks to them too, Cameron, as well. It actually does, because again, it all comes down again to choice and choice based on values. So yeah, I'd love to have a conversation to see whether the work would be meaningful.
Definitely.
Further questions?
Well, I was the one who raised the hand.
Hi,
I think
Henry.
intuitively. Hello, everyone,
Hi,
and I'm very sorry. Time zone fights are, I thought I would be on time, and then you're in the middle. But I will review the video. But the energy I saw from all the workstream leaders makes me, my heart shine. And the choice, Angela, it's spot on. I think this is the combination of these conversations. Now, I missed the first part, so I need to get that. But it is so amazing what I can't even at the moment decide which of the 3 work streams I will contribute to, because ultimately, if you do the choice of values, they, it is a bit of a mix, right? So, and yes, but I'm very grateful to be here in the conversation, like the 4th time now, and Ines is there too, and that we create, like, hopefully a web which is very, for renaissance of the human soul. That's more my intention, and that we have a wonderful time together. And maybe the one question I do have, actually, I'm not sure whether you said this earlier, is how are we making sure that the contributors not only do their only little thing and they send out to you then decide whether and how it's going to be placed, and that's it. But rather than that, we create at the end of this, like something which is of course based in South Africa, and the biggest energy is down there, but we weave these connections globally also, virtually, and we make a little bit of a movement of a MOOC out of this. So because having been here 4 years, it always happens, huge, things, but then it ends up there, and we should bring it globally together to have that conversation. And if we want to do that, then we need to start planning this now, and not thinking, okay, now we have the papers, and now, but rather maybe we need an extra task force where, we say, oh, so how do we make this more visible on the planet this time? That's my question to the organizers.
So maybe if I can come in, if you don't
Yeah.
mind, before Dima comes in. I think, Hendrik, welcome. And that's one of the reasons why we do not see this as just a 2025 project. We see it as more long-term project for us. We're looking at 3 years, but we're also quite open to outcome. We're saying it could extend beyond the 3 years. We're very keen. Look, when we talk about this, we say we want to see an embodiment of values. That's not something that you achieve overnight. So we think this is going to be quite a process, and we're keen to engage and to see where this goes. And I believe that the support of the founding group will also help us to drive that agenda even further. So over to you, Priya. I saw also Tahiri's hand was up, and then she took it down. So maybe after Dima, we can also take Tahiri. Yes.
Oh, maybe what we should do is let Dima conclude, because, Dima, I think you are one of our key figures in our V20 community. So I'll let Tahiri and Sayan go, and then Dima, is that fine if we conclude with you, and that will bring us, I think, to the end of the session.
Sure. Although everyone is a key figure in the V20 community. Sure, I'll go last.
Okay. Tahiri. Hello, dear Tahiri.
Hi. Thank you so much for creating this wonderful opportunity and including me. I wanted to respond to the level of interest in what I've heard in terms of wanting to do something to set this experience apart from previous experiences. And for instance, this having 3-year long process, having the opening statement, which had so much emphasis on transformation and human consciousness and how we live our values. The reason why I'm here and trying to see if I can be of service in any way is that actually what sets this G20 and apart from others is that South Africa has been the site to transformation for more than 30 years. And actually what is transpiring in the form of creating the first capital for education and innovation at the heart of the regeneration of Johannesburg, which is by far the most impactful city on the continent. It's been historically. Provides us with an opportunity to showcase a case study, actually, of how transformative education, how working on our consciousness, how living different values can create phenomenal life-changing experience for individuals from any walk of life, even those who come from supposedly the most marginalized socioeconomically speaking. And so I'm referring, of course, to Education Town, which is a project that is changing the face and feel of Johannesburg CBD at the heart of the Josie My Josie project. We have something tangible to present to the world and say, look, if you come together, if you do this, if you place your values, if you focus on human consciousness, if you look at holistic development of the individual, you're able to make transformation a daily exercise. And that really sets us apart from going from just giving, research and policy papers to one of lived experience that would be a source of inspiration and hopefully reflection, consultation, and action for other communities and countries to consider what South Africa has and is doing as an example to follow.
Thank you, Tahiri. I missed, there was a hand that was up and then it's now disappeared. Please, community member.
I see Mandeep.
Yes, there was somebody before Mandeep. And then the names disappeared from the Mandeep. Please carry on in the
Maybe
meantime.
it was me, Priya, because I put my hand
confess
down.
that previous
Yes.
hand.
Oh, hi,
Can you hear me?
Mandeep.
Hi.
How are you doing? Hi.
Hi. Good to see everybody. I confess that previous hand was me logged in as my son, and then I realized that I was logged in as my son, and then I logged back out and then logged in as myself. I've just been having some tech issues, so apologies for that, and I'll lower my hand down now. Basically, I firstly just wanted to say that ever since that the team is phenomenal. Like, I love how rigorous everyone has been, how you went from like the wide framework of potential chaos to, okay, this is how we're going to solve the chaos. This is how our values framework is going to make a tangible difference. And I love the fact that you're taking a long-term approach, so that you're thinking 3 years plus, so that it really does make a substantial difference. I think as part of that long-term, let's seep into kind of the psyche and the culture and the fabric of our lives. And just as you rightly said, we're here to support. All I wanted to do was just offer our support. Thank you. I'm seeing all these messages come up, and I'll follow up. But really, like, whether it's spreading the word, whether it's anchoring deeper, whatever it is, I just couldn't let this call go without saying that we are astounded, here for you, and wanting to contribute.
Thank you. Thank you, Mandeep. Dima, handing to you.
Thank you very much. I first want to thank everyone in the South Africa team for a great proposal and great vision of the future. And I want to build on some of the comments that I heard, especially from Hendrik and also Dr. Tahira, regarding the process. And Carmen have shared some views on the V20 South Africa take on this. But also, I'd like to reflect also in order to raise the internal consciousness of us as a group onto how can we make this practice better. Because in the world of values, it has been, of course, observed by many of us, and maybe many of you, that taking values into action, into living, does require many enablers. And one enabler is case studies. Another enabler is clear, explicit, behavioral expected impact. And thus, behavioral expected impact goes across many domains. Therefore, making a scientific approach with it is going to be multidimensional, multi-field, if I may say this, if I may use this word. And also, as if it's diverse in domains and fields, it's also diverse in depth in terms what does this behavior touch? Is it the value of family, as our beloved Sherpa share, or is it a value of community, or is it a value of religious beliefs? Therefore, it's very not addressed enough topic from theoretical scientific point of view. And what we appreciate about this year's approach is the approach that shared by the team, presented by Dr. Carmen, is this internal research unit led by a very respected institution that will institutionalize our effort as a group of people, as a community. So we would have two benchmarks to compare, or two baselines to compare ourselves with, is the previous publications of V20 and the internal research that the V20 South Africa are gonna be busy developing. And how would the community of V20, of us guys, gonna be adding value in comparison to that? And how can we elevate as a group in enhancing our content and our publications and our messages to the world? So I really want to start this experience with total trust and willingness to learn as ourselves, as the community members ourselves, and as the observers of our movement. We want to learn, we want to adapt, we want to practice what matters at any given time. And this wider timeline of 3 years and maybe beyond also is applicable on us as a V20 founding group, moving from South Africa to the United States next year. And we will never know now what country comes later, but we will adapt this mindset as well, a long-term mindset of learning, continuous improvement, and adapting best practices. Thank you.
Thank you, Dima. Thank you, community. We've got this together, indeed. Thank you for your time. Thank you for your participation. We look forward to seeing your contributions. The call for papers will be hosted on our V20 Summit web page. It will be launched on the 1st of April, and it's going to be a computer-driven LMS where you'll do your submission. We look forward to receiving those submissions and engaging further. Thank you. Thank you for your time. Bye for now.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone, and thank you for being here, and we hope to engage further with you in other forums. Thank you. We really appreciate you.
Thank you.
Bye for now.
Thank you all. Have a great day,
everyone. Cheers.
Thanks, Priya. Thanks, Tabia. Thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Thanks,
everyone.
Dumi. Good to see you,
Bye.
Dumi. Bye.
Wow, so exciting. Thank you so much. Priya, sorry, I missed that. Is that going to be posted on the website? Is it for the 1st of April that the original abstracts are due?
Yes. So we'll on the not they due. The link is going to be posted on the 1st of April. You've got until the 30th of June, I think it is, to submit. Yes, the 30th of June to submit your call, your abstract.
Cool.